Hey guys, my name is Alejandro Perez, and this is my channel, Filmmaker Perez. In this channel, I'd like to teach you guys the skills and techniques that you guys need to become a better 3D developer. And in this lesson, we are going to cover creating a rig for a bouncing ball. To start off with, we are going to control click and create a sphere. And this is what is going to be our ball geometry. So I'm going to call this ball underscore geo. So that is going to be the name of the geometry. Then we're going to want to create controls and things like that. But right now, with the way the ball is, I want it to actually be on the ground because it's going to be a rig. So the ball by default, it creates it at 1 unit. So if I put it at 0.5 units up, it actually puts it right on the ground. And now that we've done that, we want to clear or clean our transformations. So that way, if we were to move anything, we can get it back to where our default was. So, oops. And there we go. Okay, so now that we have that, we need to build some controls. The controls, we are going to use null objects. So I'm going to start off with a master control here. And this is going to be ball underscore master underscore CTRL. CTRL is for control. That's just kind of the naming structure that I use to keep track of things. And with this, I am going to change the preview type on the null because it's kind of giving you this three-dimensional cross shape. And I want to have something that encompasses it all just to make it a little bit easier for us to work with. I'm going to keep it green, that's fine. And then I am going to go here where we have display and then control type. On the control type, we can choose the different types of controls that we want it to look like. I'm going to make this box, and just like with the sphere, moving it up 0.5 units. And I'm going to clean transforms. That way it's all zeroed out here. And now that we've done that, under the display uniform scale, I can actually adjust this so that it takes up the size of the ball. If we wanted to, we can look at it and make it exactly precise, and maybe for us 2 is exactly, there we go. So now that I've done that, we can look at what else we want to be able to do with the ball. So this is going to be a ball rig. And I want to be able to get squash and stretch happening pretty easily. I want to be able to squash from the bottom, squash from the top, and be able to control where the position of that is. And I also want to be able to rotate the ball even if it is squashed, and for it not to kind of tumble on itself. So in order to get all that to work, I'm going to move this off to the side. This is going to be our master control that moves everything along. And you can see when we parent it together that it jumps and moves position. I'm going to undo that really quick. And the way to prevent that is if you click on the ball, there's this checkbox that says keep position when parenting. If you check that and then parent it, it doesn't move at all. And the units all stay at 0. The units all stay, let's go back to transforms, they stay at 0 so that we can see what's going on. So that's good. We can uncheck this now, and that is fine, and it will work. If we were to cut this, it will kind of bounce back, so we can keep that on if we wanted to, if we're ever going to disconnect it, so that way it stays in the same spot. But that's how you make sure that it stays and it doesn't snap onto the pivot of the object that you're parenting to, because we want to be able to have it in this position rather than what we just had. Okay, so now I want to have a few more controls. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to create a null object again. And let's say this is our ball bottom squash and stretch underscore CTRL. And actually, since I have everything lowercase, I'm going to keep everything the same to make it easier for me in the future if I ever want to do any scripting or anything with this. So right now, if we take this ball master control and we move it, we move the ball, we don't move this other control that is on the bottom here, which is fine. I'm going to save this really quick so that if anything happens, I can recover it. So that's my ball bounce file, ball bounce rig. Okay, so I can, like I said, move it with the master control, and I can rotate, and so it's a little bit easier to see. Let's switch over to the flat wire shaded, so that way we can see the wireframe itself as we're rotating it, so that we can see it's actually rotating. Okay, so I have this control on the bottom, and I'm going to change it to something else rather than this locator. So here, and so that we can distinguish that it is, oops, wrong one. Let me make sure I'm in the right tool. There we go. So it's here on the bottom, and I'm going to switch it over to be circles. That gives me a sphere, but instead of all planes, I'm just going to tell it to do the ZX plane, and that will create a circle type control for me, which is good. And then I want to be able to distinguish top from bottom, so I'm going to set up different colors for each. Let's say that the bottom, let's make it red because that's going to be the side that mostly impacts. So now that I've done that, if I click off of it, you can see that it stays red there. Okay, since I kind of have everything that I want for this one, I'm going to copy and paste this. This is going to end up being the top squash and stretch control. So this one, instead of red, I'm going to make it blue. So I need to take this and put it 1 unit up for the top control because the ball is 1 unit tall, and we can see that once we do that, we do have the 2 controls that we want. And with these controls, I want it to move along with everything. So if I take this control here and move it, I want to be able to move it with everything else. So here I can try to connect it like that, but obviously we have a shift there. And also with the top control, I want to make sure that I clean the transforms before I go too much further, and make sure that this one is clean, but I believe it's just created at the origin, so it should be fine. And on both of these, I want to keep position when parenting, and I am going to connect them like that. So right now they're not doing anything, but if I take that control and move it around or rotate it, it moves with the control. So that is nice for what we're trying to do. And next I want another control so that I can control the center. It just gives me a little bit more extra ability to control the way the ball looks. So if I have a control in the middle, I can kind of wiggle the center part if I wanted to. So I am going to make another copy of this top control here. I am going to call it mid squash and stretch control. There we go. So now that we have that mid squash and stretch control, I'm just going to move it down half a unit. That should put it in the middle. Oops. I made it an equation, so all I really want is to be negative 0.5. There we go. So it's there in the center, perfect for what we want. It's a little bit hard to select because it's inside of the geometry. So let's go back here and adjust the scale of this. So I'll put it somewhere like that. And for the color, since it's in the middle of red and blue, if you mix both of those two colors, you get a kind of purple color. So I'll make it purple, just so that we can keep it differentiated from everything else. And then let's go back to our transforms and clean transforms. That will reset everything for us perfectly. And now the last control I believe that we need is another control that will do our rotations for us. So for that, I am going to just copy this mid controller, really. That's all I need to do. Copy and paste. And this one is going to be our ball. Rotate control. Perfect. So we have this master control here that is going to be able to let us move everything. Everything's still moving with it. Nothing is really affecting the ball except for this one right now, but we'll fix that in a little bit. Each one of these controls will end up controlling the squash and stretch on the top, the bottom, and the middle of the ball. And then the only thing that we probably want to do is on this rotate control. Let's go here, and I'm going to switch it back to kind of a green color. So that's going to be what we rotate with. And I'm going to adjust the scale a little bit so that way it's easier to select. So that way we can see that that's going to be the control to be able to affect the rotation of our ball. Cool. So these two controls, when we squash and stretch, we want to stay at the center. And if we take this control here and move it right now, it's not doing anything to keep that in the center. So basically we need to find the middle point for this. And what we're going to do is take a new null control. And I am going to connect the middle and the rotate, so the two controls that we want to be able to get into the middle point of these two controls here. And let's call this ball because it's all part of the ball. And this is going to be the center position 0. So basically this is going to set the 0 point for each one of these controls, so that way we can always reset to the middle point. The shape really doesn't matter for this because we're going to end up turning off the visibility when we're working with this and the selectability. So what we're going to want to do is basically do an expression between the top and the bottom to be able to set up where the center position is. So what I'm going to do is go on the top and let's start off with the Y, so that's going to be our up and down. And I'm going to copy parameter. And I did that by right-clicking and going down to copy parameter on that translate Y parameter. And then on this center position control, I am going to select it, right-click, and paste relative reference, so that way it changes. So this is going to basically give us the value of the top Y. Right now it's set to 0. And then we need the bottom Y. So I'm just going to copy this here, and I'm going to do a plus so that I can add it together with the bottom value. So they're both at 0. This control is at 0. That's exactly where we want it to be. The only thing we want to change is instead of it saying top, we go to bottom. That way it is looking at the correct object here. And then all of this that we have in here, we want to put it inside of parentheses. So that way we are adding it all together. And we're going to divide that by 2. So it's basically taking whatever the value of this and this, so the bottom control and the top control, whatever the total is, we're going to divide it by 2. By default, it's 0. But as we move it, it's going to change. So I'm going to push enter on the numeric keypad to finish that off. And let's start off with clicking on the top control and see if that does it. So we can see that, yeah, now it is averaging the position of the two controls, which is exactly what we want. Now that we have done that, we want to basically do the same thing on this control, but for X, Y, and Z. So here I'm just going to change the TY to be a TX and this TY to be a TX. And here I am going to do the same thing, but for TZ. And that's how you get the middle point in all 3 axes. So let's check this here. And I'm going to quickly double check that it's working on this side also. Perfect. That is what we want to be happening. It is not being affected by rotation right now. But if we wanted to have a smooth kind of arc, if we wanted to, we can do that. Or we can leave it like that and just control the rotation by itself. In this case, let's just leave it alone. But that is something that you can do as well, so that way it averages the rotation between the two, just using the same expression. You take the rotation of one channel and add it to the rotation of the other channel, add all of that together inside of parentheses, and then finish off by dividing all that by 2. And you can do that for X, Y, and Z. Great. So now that we have that done, I am going to turn off the visibility and selectivity of that, so we can see now that we can move everything, and if we rotate, it is going to rotate everything in the control, but none of these other controls are actually like doing anything for the ball. It is just they're just there right now. So we need to build some connections, and we need to build the squash and stretch setup. So I'm going to go inside of the geometry node here. And this is the sphere that is creating the ball. We basically want to set up a lattice, and that's what's going to control everything for us. So I am going to go, let's see, the deform, and we have this lattice option. I'm going to click on it. It says select points to deform. I'm going to select all those points and then push enter to complete. Now select the point cloud. I don't have a point cloud, and push enter to complete. There we go. So we have all of these nodes that it created for us. Let's look at the lattice box here. We have 3 and 3 and 3. Let's put this to 2, 2, and 2, just to make it a little bit easier to work with. Oops. Let's undo that. There we go. So basically what is happening here, it's connecting to be the geometry that needs to be deformed. The second input is going to be the default lattice shape, and the last one is how the deform of the geometry looks. So it creates this connection here, and whatever is different between here and here is what happens down here. So what we basically need to do is create a few different selections here. And in order to do selections, I'm going to go into modeling, and I am going to create a group. And what I am going to do to that is just click group here. First select the top points on the lattice, push enter on the numeric keypad. There we go. So we have group 1, and I'm going to name this to be top group. Then I can go in here and create another group. This is going to be our mid group. Let's try that again. Push enter. There we go. And we have mid GRP for group. And then we need to repeat this process again. Group. And here we go. Push enter. And this is going to be our bottom group. So even though we change the name of each one of these, you can see in blue, they're all called group 1. So we have to go back in, and we can actually, if we want, make this a little bit easier to kind of see if we want. So we have top group, mid group, bottom group, just putting it in order that way by disconnecting, then reconnecting them in the correct order we want. So here, I'm going to rename this to top. So that's our top group. This is our mid group. And then this is our bottom group. There we go. And now we need a few transform nodes. And I am going to paste a couple of them out. So putting this down here. This is going to be our top transform. And we just need to connect that there. There we go. It's going to be our mid transform. And the last one is going to be our bottom transform. There we go. We have a few controls here that we can use. Right now, if we do anything with these transforms, it's going to affect the whole object, which is not what we want. We want to be able to just affect part of it. So the way we do that is we click on the node we want to actually work on, and over here it has a group attribute inside of the parameters. If I click that, we can set it to a specific group. So I'm just going to go through and change each one. This is bottom. There we go. So we have 3 transforms now, and if we select that and we can change it here, that works pretty nice. Something that I am noticing now is that it is only, or it's transforming right here from the center. So we want to make sure that we affect the pivot, so that way it is transforming where we want it to transform. So if I rotate here, it's going to transform from the center. The mid should be already in the middle, which is perfect for us. And then the bottom, we want to move it -0.5. Oops, not move it, but the pivot we want to put at -0.5. There we go. So now that control will control the center, or the bottom, I mean. And we can rotate it. Perfect. That is all we need. And then let's build some connections here. So now that I have all that done, what I am going to do is go here and go to the, let's say, top one to start off with. And I'm going to take the translate channels here, and I am going to copy parameters. If I go back into the ball geometry on the top transform, just right click on the transform here, or the translate transform, and I'm going to tell it paste relative reference. There we go. So if we go here to the object mode and we select that top object, we can move it and it will control the ball's squash and stretch from here. We can see that the other ones aren't being affected by anything yet, so let's take those attributes right now. Also, let's just take the rotate since we're here right now. Copy parameter, go back in here, and the top transform, paste relative reference. And then I'm going to repeat that for the other 2 objects. So coming here, bottom, copy parameter, back into the ball, go into the bottom, paste relative references, there we go. And then copy parameter. Oops, I'm copying it inside of the ball, so I want to make sure that I'm going back to the bottom control. So let's copy parameter here. And paste relative reference. There we go. So we have that working for us, and let's double check both of these controls now. So we have the position and rotation working nicely on the bottom. There we go. We'll see right now that if we move both of the controllers, the bottom and the top, so if I move this and then I take this and I move this, the middle is still not connected. So let's take this control here. No, this control, this is what's going to do the position for us. And now that I have that, I am going to copy the parameters here. Yeah. I do want to copy those parameters, but I'm wondering if I want to copy the Y at all. I'm probably going to steal that. No, because that's going to give me the offset. We'll see what we do. Here, let's just try connecting this, and if it doesn't work, we'll try something else. So I'm going to take the mid control here, copy transforms, or copy the translate parameter, and then go to the mid, and let's paste. Relative reference, there we go. And let's see how that works right now. So we take this, move it. We can see that we can move this, but it's going to be moving it from the bottom right now. So it's getting us closer. We basically are going to need something that corresponds to this down in the bottom that is going to move our center point for us. So I'm going to copy these right here. Copy parameters. Go into here, and for this midpoint here, I am going to copy and paste that because this is going to be our secondary transform. So let's call this mid transform ADJ for adjust. And I'm going to delete the channels here, so that way we clear that out. And then we're going to do paste relative reference here. So let's try that now. So we can see if I take this and move it, it does move from the center now. And I can take this control and adjust it, which is exactly what we want. Okay, now here on the mid transform, I want to also connect the rotations from the mid control. Oops, let's go back this way. There you go. So I'm going to copy parameter for the mid control. Copy parameter, there we go. And I am going to go here and paste relative reference. There we go. So let's double check that the control is working. I can select that control and I can move it. The center point is fine. I can move this center point, which is nice, and I can also rotate it if I needed to and adjust everything about it. We can rotate these and really kind of get a lot of character out of the ball's movement now. Okay, so we have the squash and stretch working, and we have the overall ball control, but we can see that if we take this and stretch it and we were to rotate this, it rotates the whole thing and it doesn't rotate from the center. It's not really all that great for what we want. So let's go back into the ball geometry and fix that. In order to fix that, all we need to do is create a transform. And we'll connect to here. And I'm going to name this our rotate transform. And basically here, what we're going to do is connect our rotations to rotate the ball, and then it's going to deform after this point, and so it should keep the rotations for us. So all we need to do is go into the object mode here, our scene level, and I am going to take the rotate controls, go back to the transforms, and I'm going to copy parameters here. And then I am going to go, I copied parameters for the rotate, and let's go into this rotate transform, and I'm going to paste relative reference. There we go. So if I go here and let's squash this or stretch it, we have that there, and then we can take the rotate control and it will rotate the ball within that stretch pose. Okay, so we have the stretch kind of working, but we're not really preserving volume, so we need to make some adjustments to be able to control that. I'm going to go into, actually before I go in there, let me copy the translate y value here. And I am going to copy this parameter. And in the lattice for the deforming object here, this transform after the lattice has been created, what I want to do is go into scale, and I'm going to start off by doing the square root of, I need a value, so it's going to be 1 divided by the square root, square root of, so let me close both of these so that way I have open and close of the 2 square roots. So inside of, I need one more. There we go. So inside of here, what I need is the value. Actually, I need, let's see, square root, that goes in there. This goes all divided by 1, that's the next square root. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to do another set of parentheses in here, and that is going to be a square. Let's do a square. And inside of here, we need to have the values of the controllers, so that way we can get the distance between the two. So I'm going to paste relative reference from what we copied a little bit earlier, and that's going to give us the top control, which is nice. We just need to take that and add 1 to it, because by default the controller has a value of 1. So I'm going to take that and subtract it by, and I'm going to paste relative reference, and then change this to be bottom. There we go. And let's see if that works. Cool. So I'm going to copy all of this because we want the same value here. And I have written down the expression so that you guys can see it in the full because it doesn't quite fit all into here. It's a little bit hard to see. So here is the expression that we are working with. Basically, we're getting the square root of 1 divided by the square root of the value of the top parameter minus the value of the bottom parameter squared. So that is what is happening. If you just want to copy this and change it for whatever the name, or if you kept this name here, that is good. I'll put the expression in the description as well to get that squash. So now that we have that, it hasn't broken here. Let's go to the object level and just make sure that it works. So here we're stretching, and as we go down, we're squashing, which is perfect. Something that you will notice that if we do this right here, we're not quite preserving volume on all axes. We're only really preserving on top and down. We can make a more complicated version of the expression, but I'll just copy that into the description for you guys to get it so that you can get squash and stretch and preserve volume in all of the directions for X, Y, and Z. It will just be a little bit longer. Basically, we're going to be adding to that same expression the values of X and Z rather than just Y, and that will preserve volume in all other directions. But that is basically it for the control, except doing some cleanup. So with the cleanup, what I want to be able to do is here on the master control, I have that. What is this control? Oh, I think it's, let me save this really quick. It's that I opened up another file. So the squash and stretch is working now. We can check with the master control. Let's go here. It moves everything. It's not messing up when we adjust that value. We can do squash and stretch here, squash and stretch here. We can control this. Oops, that's going to be an issue, and we'll fix it in a moment, but we can control this. So we've got everything working. Like you saw in this one, and there's other things that are going to be needing to be fixed that we need to adjust. So like on this controller, for example, we don't want the user to be able to move it because then they're going to be confused and not know what that controller is supposed to be doing. So what we can do is actually lock those parameters. So here I'm going to right click, lock parameters on the translate, and I'm going to lock parameters on the scale as well because I don't want to be able to scale that. So now if I try to go into the transform, I'm pushing T, and you can see that the transform tool is selected. It's not going to give us access to being able to move that. It's a little bit clunky here in the properties window here. So I'm just going to click on this little gear that will let me edit the parameter interface. So I'm going to go to that, and on translate, I'm going to make invisible, and scale, I'm going to make invisible. Click accept, and you can see that it takes away that. We can give them pivot, I guess. So here, if I go to rotate, it's the only thing that I have control over. And let me just go to flat wire so that you can see that it is rotating. If we do the squash and stretch here, it will rotate based off of that. So that is working correctly. Here, I'm just gonna revert to defaults, and this control here, revert to defaults. Perfect. Here on this control, I didn't set up any scale. You can if you want to be able to control scale here, but I don't. If you wanted to connect it, you just copy parameters and send it back into the transform for the lattice for that, just like we did the rotate and scale. But I don't want scale, so I am going to lock that and go into the parameters interface, and I'm going to take the scale and turn it invisible, except that is perfect. This mid control, lock the scale. I want to rotate and translate. Hide the scale by making it invisible. There we go. And then I want to get the bottom control. Mid, bottom. Here we go. Lock these channels. Interface. Turn the scales visibility off. There. Accept. And so this is appropriate. This is working correctly. This is working correctly. This is working correctly. Here, perfect. And we have the master control that we're going to keep everything on. So I can actually move this, and I can still adjust this. If I wanted to adjust kind of the surface that the ball is bouncing on, I can rotate that as well, and that's independent of this rotating, so I can change where the actual ball is going to be squashing and stretching from. And then if we wanted to, this should be able to scale. So I have scaled this ball, and everything should still be working. There you go. So that's how you create a bouncing. So that's how you create a rig for a bouncing ball inside of Houdini 16. And I hope you guys found this useful. If you guys created anything based off of this, I'd love to see it. Please share it with me on my Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook page using the hashtag FilmmakerPerez. Other than that, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next lesson.